Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, along with my buddy Dargan Southard. I almost said Dargan Southard of the Des Moines Register. He's part of our three-man team in the press box on Saturdays. You know him very well from women's basketball coverage. Tyler Tashman today on a different assignment. He's always tracking Ben McCullum somewhere, Dargan. I know he's over doing something with the head coach. Not with him, but at an event where he's going to be. So,
He should write a book. Where in the world has Ben McCollum?
yeah, I mean, you saw Tyler's video. A lot of you did from the student section of Kinnick the other day with McCollum kind of glad handing some of those fans, and of course that was a welcome sight for some Hawkeye basketball diehards out there. And we should point out before we start this show, uh, condolences to the family of George Raveling, an icon in college basketball. He passes away today at age 88. Of course, he was the head coach for the Hawkeyes in the early 80s, preceded Tom Davis's stint, 13-year stint at Iowa, and of course, did the majority of the recruiting for the team in 1986-87 that still holds the school record by a mile with 30 wins that year. Of course, Roy Marble, B.J. Armstrong, Eddie Horton, Kevin Gamble, the JUCO transfer. George Raveling, rest in peace. And there was some talk at Kirk's presser today, Dargan, about Raveling as well. And so it kind of happened right about when we were going through our media stuff today.
Yeah, I mean that the team that you mentioned that kind of is the centerpiece of what was done there. I mean, that's obviously I wasn't here, but that feels like the team that everybody, when you hear from old Iowa basketball fans, they gravitate toward. And I know that team has a special place in a lot of people's hearts, and so unfortunate, today's news. But as you said, rest in peace, and had a good life and a good basketball career for sure.
Yeah, much bigger than basketball for George Raveling. And hey, maybe Ben McCollum will throw the tie away for the first matchup and wear like a full sweatsuit like Raveling used to do on the Hawkeye sideline. But anyway, you guys are here mostly to hear about Iowa football. It is Cyhawk week. Because I have Dargan here, we usually do three topics in about 30 minutes on this show. We're going to make our third topic women's basketball, at least sort of. It might be toward the end. But obviously, a big recruit, as you guys know, was in town this past weekend at Kinnick Stadium. We'll talk about what we're hearing from that visit, about from McKenna Velichko, the number 6 prospect in the nation from San Jose. But Dargan, I think you and I were talking. You know, you were there with us on Saturday. Mark Gronowski's performance in the passing game certainly was not up to par. He said that as much. And I think our first topic today is more so. I know our first topic today is around what's the vibe on the offense like 3 days later. You're always writing up our what Mark Gronowski said things. So you've probably actually heard more of Gronowski's comments than I did. I know Tyler's working on a story on that as well. But what Mark Gronowski said, what stood out to you from his comments from today?
Yeah, not really surprising. A lot of talk about just slowing down and kind of not as jittery, let the game come to you. And, I know Iowa fans don't exactly, are not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt under center after the way that the last few seasons have gone. But, there is a path to where there's some truth to that. And obviously we'll find out a lot about whether there's truth to that this weekend. Because while there are while Mark Gronowski brings a lot of experience and a lot of accolades, this was easily the biggest environment I think that he's been in this past Saturday, and it's not going to get any easier. And so I think the vibe and the talk, at least from him, was what you would want to hear from your leader, one of your team captains, is not panicking and not, acting like the season's over after one bad performance in week one. But I think the urgency is definitely there that the offense has to look better this weekend and has to be a factor with the passing game because, obviously Kamari Moulton's going to be out. That doesn't help things and puts a little more pressure on top of the pressure that's already been accumulated for a while that, the passing game can't be the liability that it's been for a lot of the last few years. So, obviously, no matter, depending on where you fall in the spectrum, you're going to kind of roll your eyes at that or get behind it. But, I think for now, there's some validity to that will obviously get tested this weekend. So, obviously a lot of other offensive guys there, throughout the team. What did you kind of hear as far as guys around Mark who, maybe didn't have as big of a game or output as they wanted to on Saturday?
Yeah, I think Sam Phillips is actually he's one of the guys I talked to today as well, and I think he's a good snapshot maybe of um, the vibe of the offense right now. So here's a guy that he was the guy that was wide open in the end zone on the very first drive, and it's in my story. My five thoughts column are up, but he talked about how he was running across the field thinking, I'm going to score a touchdown on my birthday. It was his birthday on Saturday, and of course that ball comes up short. I mean, it would have been a great finish. It would have been that first drive was actually a play calling art form. I mean, Tim Lester did a great job moving them down the field. They had all kinds of different looks. They had different guys running the ball. They had, rollouts that, to Ostrango there. He missed the throw to Anderson over to the left. But there was a lot of good stuff on that drive too, and it would have been the perfect finisher. He had the play action bootleg after you set up the run. He's wide open. He misses him. And I think Phillips is a good microcosm of kind of where the vibe of this offense is because they know they're good. Like if you look at the film, like those receivers were open all day long, at least on the underneath stuff. Now they were taken away. There's somebody that said they're not sure that my mic's on. So am I not coming through as loudly as I need to?
You sound okay to me, but
okay.
Maybe the others.
If you guys want to, I hate to interrupt myself there because I don't want you guys to miss anything. But if it's bad for you guys, I'll just unplug everything and then I'll try to just use my mic is on. I think. Yeah, that was it. Anyway, sorry, this is live. We're not messing it up, but
fixing it on the fly. No, yeah. We're good.
See, that's not any better, right? No.
It's week one. We're making week 1 to week 2 adjustments for everybody here.
Okay. They say we can hear you, Chad. Dargan is just way louder. Okay.
I'll talk with a lower tone. Maybe that'll be okay.
Okay, your mic is working just on the quiet side. All right. Sorry, guys. Sorry. I don't know what's happening. Here. Is that any better? How about that? You guys tell me. Anyway, moving on. Where was I? Phillips. These guys were open underneath. They've got playmakers. I mean, we saw Sam Phillips kind of be that playmaker with the punt return, and it really was just this is the messaging from today that is getting all these messages. I'm so distracted. The message of the day was that Gronowski just needs to calm down, and we heard that after the game. Sounds like he's had 2 really good days of practice, that Kirk is comforted by what he has seen, and that's all he has to do. I mean, the guy's played 55 games of football, 56 now, and he's got that in his bag, right? But that's the idea. And then, he's so distracted. He can make the throws. I mean, we saw that later in the game. He made the nice throw to Weechin on 4th down. He made the nice throw to Gill. It's a very small sample size, admittedly, but as the running game got going, he did calm down. He did look a little bit better, Dargan. And I'm going to unplug everything here now. We'll try that.
Yeah, and I mean, it is, for me, I guess, a little concerning to hear a guy that played that much football and played in high-pressure situations say that, he was too amped up or wasn't maybe in the best state going into that. I thought his quote was interesting about, I think he phrased it as being your number, kind of not getting too amped up throughout the course of the day. And maybe the 11 a.m. kick will help with that, obviously not having to wait around for the duration of a long day before you play. And so perhaps that'll, kind of make a difference in that sense. But I think, you got to trust with what you kind of put all your effort into acquiring. This is Iowa's guy. This is who they feel like, and I feel most people still feel like gives Iowa the best chance to be good offensively. And so, even though week one against a very manageable team was a bit of a dud, there are certainly big time opportunities coming up to showcase that experience and that veteran presence that Iowa, frankly paid for this offseason. And so, maybe you didn't envision that kind of challenge this early in the season where, you're already kind of looking to your quarterback to bounce back and be that veteran guy that's been through a lot. But at the same time, that was going to happen at some point this year. And so having a situation early in the year that feels, even, concerning, I feel like is an accurate word coming out of Saturday. But I do feel like, and as you alluded to, there are a lot of things that can, be corrected to make it a cleaner effort and a cleaner production this coming Saturday. So again, I understand the concern from everybody, and I think it's valid and it's justified, but I still think calling everything incomplete and just saying, hey, we need a little bit more time and adjustment and feel for how this Gronowski experience is going to go. I think that's more than fair as well.
We're gonna try. I'm trying with my computer mic here, so just let me know how this sounds. Um, there's a question in the chat that says, "Do you agree with the coaches taking the game out of his hands and sticking to the run game after his poor performance?" And I've gotten that question a lot in my text group and on email. There's a lot of people upset about that, that they didn't just let him work it out through the air. And I honestly had zero problem with that. It's sort of like they had that option the other day of like, let's get this game in the books, let's get it over with. We'll work on that stuff in practice. He's not going to calm down. They dealt with that with Brendan Sullivan a little bit last year, where he would kind of flake out at certain points. And I'm not comparing him to Sullivan in that way because I think he's a better player, but they just didn't want to go down the road where if he's off with his passing game, maybe he throws a pick six, maybe he does something really weird, and they have the offensive line, they can take control of the game. So I totally agreed with it, and it honestly made Gronowski look a little bit better as it went on. I think it calmed him down some. Obviously, the cramps caught up with him at the end. So, but circling back to that user's point, Dargan, before we close the Gronowski talk, is I do think this week against Iowa State that his legs are going to be a major asset. Just think of the game. They play that 3-3-5 scheme. Think of how many times they've only had to rush 3 and they drop 8, and Spencer Petras is back there with nobody to throw to, with worse receivers. If they're gonna drop and play coverage, he might be able to scramble, and he's got some wheels. He's able to get those tough yards. I mean, how often in the Cyhawk game does it feel like Iowa's had a 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, maybe even a 3rd and 1, and just can't get it? But now they got the tush push going. They've got, they were 10 for 16 on 3rd down the other day, 2 for 2 on 4th down. So I do think the Gronowski run game element is something that is here to stay, and I have no problem with it. I think you use the gifts that you use what you have, and try to win games. And I think that it's an injury risk, sure, but that's also part of his game. That's also part of what you got him here for. You didn't bring him here to be a pocket passer completely. You brought him here to be a full quarterback. So that's kind of where I am on all that.
Yeah, and you look at today's game, and there are your Lamar Jacksons out there where the running is pretty much just as big of a deal as the passing. But when you have the mobile label, so to speak, in today's climate, it's really more of that, extending plays, picking up short gains when things break down, improvising on the fly to extend drives and not have things get bogged down. And, I think there's a lot of encouragement that Mark Gronowski can have that be an effective part of his game because, especially when other parts of the offense maybe aren't as smooth, you can kind of rely on that improvising to bail out and keep drives alive. And that's obviously, the margin for error in this rivalry has been so small over time, but really of late. And you never know when something like that might make a difference.
Looks like you've
So
got your own issues, noise issues over there going
uh,
on with your son.
my
But
son is creeping into the picture,
yeah.
but
Yeah. Feel free to hit mute if you need. I can ramble for a while. All right, let's go to our second topic, which is this week 1 to week 2 jump. We saw Iowa State really experience that this past week. Not that Iowa State looked bad at all against Kansas State. That was a really impressive win over in Ireland. But definitely there were some, there were some ups and downs in that victory over there. And Kansas State obviously had its own struggles with North Dakota this past weekend. So you wonder how good they are. But Iowa State looked like a machine against a really good FCS team in South Dakota on Saturday, 55-7 win. I rewatched that game, and man, Rocco Becht was sensational. It was it's very intimidating to see a team, you know, click that well this early in the season, and that's led to a lot of Iowa fans hoping that there will be this week 1 to week 2 jump. That was actually the first question of the press conference today. I got a chance to ask that of Kirk Ferentz. Wasn't expecting anything great, but I thought maybe he'll peel out an anecdote or something of a year where there was a week 1 to week 2 jump. And, his answer was basically really this whole first month is a huge developmental period for us. And that's why I think this 5-game block, still, if Iowa can come out of it 4-1, I think you feel really good. So if you lose this week, not the end of the world. Indiana looked a little worse. Maybe you can get out of this 4-1 and then move on to the real meat of the schedule. But I do think that that's possible. That's it. That is possible that Iowa has that leap this week, starting at the quarterback position. Dargan, as a longtime football follower yourself, what do you think of that week 1 to week 2, adage, I guess you could say?
Sorry, I'm trying to run away from my son here as I'm moving through the house.
That was impressive.
I think in this situation you can see a route where there is a lot of growth, and that adage is more than a cliche because if Mark Gronowski, if it truly was just nerves and it truly was getting comfortable with the setting, you can see some of that fading in this upcoming game and being more relaxed and being more, comfortable with everything. And, it might seem weird to say that going into what's going to be a tough road environment, but, the distractions are often less on the road. You can kind of dial in more on what you want to do. And so, across the board, I think there's a lot of guys that used week 1 to get those jitters out, get their feet wet, kind of get comfortable with, okay, this is what my role is going to be. It's bigger than it's been before, but and then you see that growth going into week 2. So I think it's, again, it's, as Kirk said, it's not automatic. And if you just kind of bank on it happening, maybe it doesn't always go that way, but I feel like that there's a lot of evidence there to suggest that some of this stuff can be cleaned up, sooner rather than later.
So where do we want to see maybe a week 1 to week 2 jump? Obviously, Gronowski, we covered that. I think I'm interested. I mean, we didn't talk much about the defense in our coverage today, but I'm going to get to that as the week goes on. We're talking to Seth Wallace tomorrow, so we're going to get a lot more questions in on that. But I think, I don't think we're totally sold on where Iowa's cornerbacks are at. TJ Hall and Deshaun Lee looked fine the other day. Albany hit a couple passes, but they were really tough passes. I mean, you got to give them credit there. I think that's one area where I'd like to see some progress there. I think Iowa's going to have to play a little bit more man coverage on the edge, or maybe more isolate. They're going to play zone, but like more one-on-one situations because they have to account for Iowa State's tight ends. I mean, Ben Bramer's terrific. They're loaded at that position, and that's kind of the bread and butter of their game. You almost think about 2018 Iowa, where you had Fant and Hawkinson. I don't want to say that's like that, but they lean on their tight ends like that. So it's kind of like that type of offense where it kind of goes through the tight ends. And then, I think other than that, middle linebacker, I think was, inside linebacker, I should say. I mean, those guys were making their first starts, and you'd like to see a little cleaner game on that front. But honestly, Dargan, like when I rewatched the game, and I know it's Albany, I totally get that. You guys can put as many asterisks on this comment as you want, but I thought Iowa actually looked pretty impressive in a lot of areas. Rewatching the game, particularly in the trenches, which this game, typically is decided on.
And obviously for a lot of reasons, so many Iowa fans are just kind of penciling in, even with the new faces on defense, that it's going to find its way to being a unit that looks like most Phil Parker units do. But along with that, I think it was important that your Jaden Harrells, your TJ Halls, and even a bigger role, Deshaun Lee, Lutmer, a lot of those guys that are solidified in the starting lineup game in and game out for the first time. I think you want to see steps forward. And obviously, as you indicated, this isn't, this is going to be a much tougher test than it was last Saturday. And I feel like, having more of the game be on the defense than normal is probably to be expected here. And so, it's not an easy test. It's not, obviously Iowa State's offense has, has a little more cohesion than Iowa's defense does in terms of faces being together and whatnot. But, I think there was enough encouragement early in week one to feel decent about that unit. But, again, this could be a big step forward for those guys.
Yeah, I think uh, left tackle, Trevor Locke. I mean, that was a big question coming into the year. Again, it's Albany. I get it, but had a really good game. So did Jack Doetzler. So did the tight ends, honestly. I mean, Hayden Large was a demon in the blocking game for Iowa the other day, and they used him a lot. He had the second most tight end snaps. In fact, Ortworth had the fourth most tight end snaps. So they were really going heavy with their best blocking tight ends, Ostrenga and Large. DJ Voname also got a lot of snaps. Michael Burt got some snaps. So they were going five tight ends deep the other day, heavy in 12 personnel. So I do like the versatility of this Tim Lester offense. I think we'll get into it in our preview show, but I think Iowa's wide receivers, while they were completely underused for obvious reasons on Saturday, I do think that that's an improved position group, even without Reese Vanderzee, that could be a big part of this game plan. Short passes, get him in space, and try to make big plays out of that because Iowa State's defense is really good. And if you remember that Iowa State game last year, Caleb Johnson ran for 187 yards, but it was a lot of like big runs and a lot of like nothing runs. So you're not going to be able to crank out 7-8 yards every time in the run game like you did last week against Albany. All right, Dargan, we got a couple minutes left. Let's talk some women's hoops. We promised we would. McKenna Velichko wraps up her visit. She's back in California now. Hearing that it went really well, and it's down to Iowa, South Carolina, obviously. Ohio State and Southern Cal are the other finalists, but feeling good about Iowa's chances here. Don't want to put a percentage on it, but I said 40. You said 50 ahead of the visit. I'd say definitely it's gone up at least 20 or 30% since this past weekend in Iowa's favor. So feeling pretty optimistic, but it's not a done deal. Nothing to announce yet at this point, but man, that would be just a big get. What did you see and hear from her visit?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. I think Iowa put its best face on for McKenna and her family coming back for a second time to Iowa City. And, I think that it really can't be understated how big of a get this would be for a lot of reasons. Obviously Iowa has, since the back-to-back Final Fours, they've been in the conversations for a lot of these high-end prospects, some even in the final 4 or 5 schools that these players are considering. And that was, not something that was happening pre-Caitlin Clark. But, ultimately, a lot of these high-end attempts to bring in these top recruits have ended, with kind of a thanks but no thanks. And so, I feel like this really kind of reestablishes this next push, post Caitlin. Obviously, last year had a role in that. This year will have a role in that. But if they get Velichko, and really, that feels like, okay, there's another wave coming that this program can deliver post Caitlin, separate from Caitlin. Obviously, she's going to be a big part of the program forever, but getting another high end player to have as a centerpiece and build everything around, especially when on top of that, feel like all the players on the current team are going to get another year of experience, another year of growth this coming season, to where, if and when McKenna gets here, she can slide right in and have, an abundance of established weapons around her. And so, I think it's a lot of, what do you kind of want out of your college basketball career? If you want to be, competing for a national title every single season, undoubtedly, and you want, the notoriety of South Carolina, then, that's a good place to go. But it feels like that you can be even more of a centerpiece and really be the face of a brand when you come to Iowa and have a good career, as we've seen. So a lot of different nuances, a lot of different elements to this. It feels like it's going to be wrapped up here, not too much longer. Obviously, Iowa was her last official visit. So I think Iowa's put itself in as good of a position as possible to get this done.
Yeah, as we said on a previous show, I mean, she'd be a perfect fit. I mean, absolute perfect fit. Hannah Stuelke is going to play the four this year. Iowa's going to need a four. McKenna Velichko could be that person for the next 4 years. She would be an instant impact player. She would go perfectly with Addie Deal, perfectly with Layla Hayes, Ava Hayden. I mean, they would be really good in that front court. And then you just, maybe if you can land another big guard or two along the way, and plus you still got the kind of those depth pieces like Stremlo, Chit Chat, uh, you know, uh, that's it's a lot to like with this whole group, but we'll see. It's not done yet, but hopefully we'll have good news for you guys here in the coming weeks. Thanks, Dargan, for joining us. I'm really sorry, everyone, that the microphone stuff was a mixed bag today, but hopefully you got some content and some value out of this. I'm basically jumping into this like the second I finished my writing and everything, and don't have a lot of prep time to. This is kind of on the fly. So we try to get this to you every Tuesday. We'll have a regular Hawk Central show tomorrow. Post game pod Saturday night from Ames. Thanks, Dargan. Good job today.
Appreciate it. See you guys later.
All right. Talk to you later, everyone.